2014. I don't have any announcements or information about upcoming meetings, so we will move right into the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
Terry Borneman.
Here.
Jean Knutson.
Here.
Kathy Lehman.
Here.
Michael Olaquist.
Here.
Roxanne Murphy.
Here.
Pinky Vargas. Jack Weiss.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to conduct our 15-minute public comment period. Any members of the audience are welcome to come down and speak to council on any subject they wish for up to 3 minutes, except for items that are up for public hearing tonight, which includes an ordinance and public hearing considering a text amendment in the Leonard Streets neighborhood and a resolution and public hearing on the Alabama Court Safety. So any topics besides those two topics. And I have 3 folks signed up: Rick Girardini, Yoshi Ravel, and Kate Blystone.
Good evening. I believe the city has 27 neighborhoods within its confines, and I hope that the council is responsible to each of the neighborhoods equally. I know that in the past, almost to when there was and loitering and issues, when the issue about an issue, he was responsive with help about it. When 100-acre wood was an issue for the city found a way to borrow money from itself to pay for that and hopefully pay itself back. When there were issues about height in the Fairhaven area, the city as well as the developers worked out a plan to make that work. You've always found a way to serve the neighborhoods when there was a need and to serve your constituents, and that's all the citizens of the city of Bellingham. At each of your city council meetings, I trust that you'll respond in the same fashion to all neighborhoods. When there's an issue that affects a neighborhood, I please hope and pray that you respond accordingly and you fix it. And again, I live at 2609 Queen Street, neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Please do not respond to speakers. We try to create an environment where we don't have a response so that anybody who has differing opinions doesn't feel like they can't express their opinion. Thank you. Yoshi Ravel.
Thank you. My name is Yoshi. Thank you, members of the audience and members of staff, members of City Council, and Madam Mayor. I offer the following poem for your consideration. It's called Some Thoughts. I think for myself, which often means clashing with conservatives, and liberals for that matter. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs. I think sex is overrated and loud music a health hazard. I think all religions come from the same source and war is the same as murder. I think rich people are failures and poor people courageous. I think nature is beautiful and banks are thieves. I think abortion is a crime and money a delusion. I think science pushers can be as boneheaded as religious fanatics, and free will is not an excuse to be stupid. I think we are fortunate to be alive, and I love the innocence of children. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoshi. Kate Blystone.
Kate Blystone, Program Director at Resources for Sustainable Communities. I always like following Yoshi. Fills me with joy. So I saw your dialogue this afternoon on the population projections, and I was moved to say something tonight. It reminded me of my life as a planner for Whatcom County, and I was involved in the 2009 Urban Growth Area Update. And Kathy and Michael would constantly corner me about the number, and I felt then that I woke up screaming from nightmares, pick a number already, pick a number. It's exhausting. And we spent a lot of time on the number in 2009, and we spent a lot of time on it now. I sat through the county council discussions, and I listened to poor Greg Ockett get totally slammed by the Planning Commission about how you guys aren't doing your job. And it was awful. And I just wanted to say that I'm a planner, and I'm more concerned about what we do with the number than what it is. I share Michael's concerns, Councilmember Lilliquist's concerns. It's probably too high. It's probably way too high, if we're honest about it. And I'm not a big fan of the high number, but you'll have opportunities to adjust it. You'll have plenty of opportunities between now and 2016. And if when the planners get to work on it and they decide, we're going to have to expand the UGA big time to make this happen, guys, I'm pretty sure, well, I'm hoping that you guys go, nope, that's the line. We're going to have to readjust. And even when you do adopt this number, you're going to have to redo it again in 8 years. So keep that in mind as well. I think it's time for the planners to get to work, and I also think it's time for you guys to share your priorities with the planners. I think you should tell them if you don't want a UGA expansion now, so that they bring you options that are good, that are, you've 3 or 4 different options to look at and go, yeah, these are all good options. Wow, it's going to be hard to make a decision. If you want more parks, tell them that. If you want more multimodal transportation or more infill, tell them that. Tell them that now, so that they bring you something good. I think this is going to be a hard process. In 2009, we had, 9 months to get it done. So 3 years is a long time. And I just ask you to use your time wisely and let the planners get to work now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Anyone else want to speak to council during this time? Sorry. Anyone else want to speak to council? Come on down. Yeah. If there's anyone else, please come down at this time and form a line. Any subject but the 2 that are on the docket for public comment today. Okay, you can just introduce yourself. And
my name is Susan Ediger Bloom, and this is the second meeting I've ever been to, and I don't know procedure, and I don't even know if I'm in the right time at the right place for this. I just came because I had this flyer on my door about median. So is this the wrong timing?
that's for
Wrong
one
timing?
of the items that have a public hearing tonight. So you'll have
Okay,
another chance
sorry.
to come up. That's okay. Yeah, very soon. So, yeah, any subjects besides the Alabama corridor issue and the Leonard Streets rezone?
What's the number? She was discussing something about a
Sorry,
number.
we don't respond to speakers at this time, but you can ask any of us at another time, yeah. Okay, if there are no other public comments at this time, we're going to close the public comment period and move on to one of our first public hearings. The first one is an ordinance and a public hearing to consider a text amendment to remove a special requirement under Bellingham Municipal Code 20.00.00 for 8 Leonard Streets neighborhood.
Good evening, City Council. Jeff Thomas with Planning. Joining me for the first public hearing is Ryan Nelson, one of our project planners. And your first public hearing this evening for a text to the streets. It's to remove an existing special regulation from the zoning table within Area 8, excuse me. The site, Ryan's just firing up the overhead here, I think, and we'll get a snap property for you. The property is zoned residential multi. The density of the property is 1 unit per 1,500 square feet. The total site, there's 2 parcels. They measure 50 by 200, as you can now see up on the screen. So the existing density of the site, it would yield up to 6 units to be constructed. The regulation that's proposed to be removed from the zoning table is to remove a requirement that the site be developed as parking in association with the Copper Building just to the south of this site, kitty corner, the parking area. There it is there. Ryan's got it now with his pen. So this came about as a request to initiate a text amendment from a potential purchaser of the property. And in the spring of last year, that request was submitted to the planning department. I was inclined to initiate that request. We moved the proposal to eliminate the special regulation for parking development through the Planning Commission. Here just a short time ago, I believe it was a month, 6 weeks ago, and the commission was inclined by a vote of 5-0 to forward it to you with a positive recommendation to remove the special regulation. As outlined in the staff report and in the Planning Commission findings, staff feels that this is an appropriate site for good infill development with the multi-zone. Infill housing forms are eligible to be used on the site, and certainly as we've been discussing through conversations as recently as this afternoon, every unit counts at this point, and we feel this is an opportunity to bring some good design and some good housing forms into the Ledger Streets neighborhood. With that, I'm going to ask Ryan so you can actually see the special regulation up here on Exhibit B. This is also in your packet. It's simply just striking that sentence on the right-hand screen. I'm going to ask Ryan to step through just a little bit of the history in regards to, again, the association of this site with the Copper Building, so you can gain a little bit better understanding of that. And we can certainly answer any questions you may have before opening the public hearing.
Thank you, Jeff. So my name is Ryan Nelson with the Planning Department, and as Jeff indicated, the subject property is an undeveloped piece of property located on Hallett. It has a relatively unique history. In 1969, the Copper Building, which is right here, was developed with 43 associated parking stalls to facilitate the use of offices. The regulations have not changed since that time frame. Subsequently, in 1981, the subject property owner who owns the Copper Building and this property applied a conditional use permit and a variance application to develop the property into a for the Copper Building. Their conditional permit and variance was denied by the Board of Adjustment due to associated issues with access and concerns, and so the property subsequently sat vacant for ultimately another decade. Went through another comprehensive plan amendment process where it was from residential single to residential multi. During that time frame, City Council and staff received comment from the surrounding property owners that it would be beneficial for the subject property to be built as a private parking facility for the Copper Building, and subsequently the specific regulations under the Leonard Street Neighborhood Plan were modified to restrict the use of the property to that use solely. So there have been numerous changes since 1979 when the subject Copper Building was built. Ultimately, when we review text amendments, we review them for consistency with the city's comprehensive plan. Some of the, I guess, highlighted components or changes in the last couple decades would be a significant increased reliance upon multimodal transportation options, so bicycles, high-frequency transit, things of that nature. There's also been numerous improvements by the city and Whatcom County in terms of developing this lot as a governmental office parking area, as well as improvements along A Street, which have provided additional parking opportunities within the right-of-way. Staff has not received any formal complaints over the last decades associated with comments from impacts from the Copper Building, and we've received 2 comments in support of the proposed amendment. So it appears to really fit within our comprehensive plan goals, and we're recommending approval. So if there are any questions, we'd certainly be happy to answer those.
Okay, any questions from council before we open the public hearing? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so at this time, we'd like to open the public hearing for this item. I have one person signed up, Devin Gilliland. You could come down and speak.
Good evening. I'm Devin Gilliland. I represent the RJ Group, which is the developer and potential purchaser of this property. We're looking to develop the parcel that we're discussing tonight, and just wanted to give a brief statement about that. We're looking forward to contributing to the Leonard Streets neighborhood in a very positive way with an infill project here. We have been in contact with the neighbors, and we're aware of some of the concerns that they have. We look to develop this site in a responsible manner, taking into consideration those concerns. And overall, we're just really looking forward to working with staff to create a positive infill housing form. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else hope to speak on this item tonight? Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing on this and look to council. Terry.
I would move that we pass the ordinance. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Michael.
I'd like to speak in favor of the motion. The word infill is used a lot. It's often stretched and abused to mean any single kind of development whatsoever within city limits. Its original meaning is exactly what this is, a small little left bit of lot. It's an opportunity for, mass development. From my understanding is that the zoning is acceptable to the neighborhood for use as residences. If indeed they follow the infill toolkit model, there'll be design guidelines. It'll be attractive as well as development. So I think we should remove this barrier.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into our second public hearing of the evening on the Alabama corridor safety improvements. Public Works will present the multi-agency recommendations for safety improvements to the Alabama Street corridor from Cornwall Avenue to St. Clair Street as a result of the year-long Phase 1 study of feasible alternatives. The Phase 2 construction of safety improvements on Alabama Street must be clearly defined for federal grant funding purposes with construction completed by September 30th of 2015. Public Works seeking from the design engineering the multi-agency safety improvements. So we'll have some brief comments from staff and then open the public hearing.
Yes, thank you, Ted. Public Works Department, that's exactly right. Just a few comments before I turn it over to Chris Como, who will provide a brief presentation that will go through the recommendations. As you recall, back in 2011, WashDOT approached the city about the Alabama corridor, and it was based on the high accident rate, the second highest accident rate throughout that corridor, second only to the Guide Meridian. So WashDOT approached the city of Bellingham with an invitation-only grant opportunity. It's part of their Towards Zero accident goal as part of their safety funding. And we negotiated with WashDOT that the grant be broken into 2 different phases. And we've completed Phase 1, which was, or we're wrapping up Phase 1, which was the feasibility analysis that would look at the corridor to identify specific safety improvements. And that's really the key to this. This is all about safety. It's all about safety throughout the corridor, both for vehicular traffic, transit, pedestrian, and cyclists that utilize the Alabama corridor. So over the last year or so, we've had a multi-agency team go through that feasibility analysis. We've come up with a list of recommendations that have come out of that study, and Chris will go through those recommendations here tonight prior to opening it up to the public hearing. ultimately, what we'll need from council is whatever the improvements are that council recommends, whether they're the staff recommendation or whether those are modified to some degree, council will have to pass a resolution adopting or approving those set of improvements. We'll send that down to WashDOT, and that's an important part of the process, is that the DOT, as part of this funding opportunity, will have to approve whatever improvements are scheduled for the corridor to make sure that they do, in fact, reduce the accidents, reduce the collision rate throughout the corridor, and provide the necessary safety improvements throughout the corridor. So with that, Chris will run through the recommendations. We'll certainly be here to answer any questions that council may have and then open it up to the public hearing.
Great, thank you, Ted.
Good evening, Council. Chris Como, Public Works. As Ted mentioned, we've been at this for almost 2 years now. We got the grant in May 2012, and I'm going to just start running through some of this. Some of you I know were at the open house, so some of these will be quite familiar slides to you. As Ted mentioned, we've had a pretty significant collision history on Alabama, and as he mentioned, it's second only to Guide Meridian. Guide Meridian is shown here, the tall blue bar. Alabama is right behind it. And what's important about this slide is that the number of collisions on Alabama represents about 5 times the average county collision. So it's clearly not an acceptable situation, and our mission is to try to reduce the number of collisions. When you spread the collisions out geographically on the corridor, this is what they look like, and the tallest spikes are clearly at some of the signalized intersections. But I'd like you to call your attention to all of the other collisions in between the major signalized intersections, which are quite substantial and far beyond what's acceptable. So what we set out to do is look at ways to try to reduce the collision rate while at the same time making sure the corridor could continue to function as a multimodal transportation corridor. And when I use that term, I'm talking about all major modes of transportation. And on Alabama in particular, it is important components, because on Alabama Street, Route 331, the Gold Go line, is the most productive route in the entire WTA system, including the university routes. I want to call your attention to the fact that a bunch of people from the different agencies involved in this project here tonight. Rick Nicholson from WTA. We've got Bill Hewitt from the Bellingham Fire Department, and Dennis James and Jason Monson from the Bellingham Police Department. They're kind of over there in the corner. You can't really see them. Chris Breland from Farron Piers. He's our consultant from Seattle. He's helped us with the road diet analysis. Our project engineer, Freeman Anthony, is in the audience. I saw him somewhere here earlier. Don't know where he went. He's hiding. And then also Tom Weller from our Transportation Commission. And I'm not sure if there's any other Transportation Commissioners here. If there are, please raise your hand, but I didn't see any others. Anyway, there's been a lot of people involved with this project from the get-go. And again, we've been at it for about 2 years now. And so what you're going to hear about tonight is essentially a unified recommendation. Here's the public process that's taken. I'm not going to walk through everything here, but you can see that it's been going on for quite some time, and we have had a number of public meetings. And I've gone ahead and included the bicycle master plan here because it's interrelated with what we're trying to do on this corridor in terms of the bike boulevards that we're talking about and that you'll see recommendations for. At the first open house that we had for this project in February 2013, these are the 10 alternatives that we laid out for people to react to. We had some kind of prototype alternatives developed and had some stations set up for people to come out and look and comment on these different things we intended to study before we studied them. So about a year went by, and after we had this public open house, we had to wait for the bicycle master plan to catch up to us, because that didn't until 2013. And then more recently, we had the bicycle plan open house in February, followed it up with the second open house for Alabama. They go in stepwise fashion, and it's a really important thing to see the integration between these two plans. So when we get into the meat of our alternatives analysis, the no action alternative, or doing nothing, is something that we're not prepared to recommend. So we eliminate that right off the bat. The next 3 alternatives are all about the road diet, or the concept of a road diet. Alternative number 2 is what we call a comprehensive road diet, and we'll get into what a road diet is in just a second, but that goes from one end of the corridor to the other end of the corridor, the entire thing. The third alternative was what we call a modified road diet, and that was primarily between the major signalized intersections on the corridor. And then the fourth one is looking at just parts of the corridor where we could make the road diet work. In terms of what a road diet is, it's essentially just reallocating the physical space on a roadway, and this is the classic example of taking a 4-lane facility down to 3 lanes. It just so happens that when you do something like this, there is often space on the edges to put in bicycle lanes. That's not always why they're done, but it's often why they're done. You could put parking on the edges in other circumstances. But the main benefit of doing this is you get the center turn lane there in the middle. If you're looking to implement bike facilities, it's also a great option there. But what we look at as well is the traffic volumes. And there's some general rules of thumb, but there's also some really complex factors you have to look at when you try to imagine if a road diet will work or not. We did quite a bit of analysis. We had consultants hired from Seattle to do that analysis. They worked with our Whatcom Council of Governments and the regional travel demand model to look at how that would work. On the west end of Alabama, you've got 13,000 per day, and this 19,000, and on the east end, you've got about 16,000. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important the transit component is on Alabama. When we look at doing this, we also have to look at what consequences might be to our transit agency in terms of maintaining on-time bus service. The reason we would want to do a road diet on a corridor like this is because it is a proven countermeasure, and it's specifically looking at eliminating 3 distinct collision types that we clearly experience out here on the Alabama corridor, and that's people turning across traffic, making left turns, rear-end collisions where people either don't know there's a car in front of them that's stopped and hit them, or somebody's not using their signal, or both, and then a side swipe where the car is trying to avoid that stopped car and then swerves into somebody else. All 3 of these are happening out on the corridor. The collision graphic that I showed you and all the numbers that we're talking about tonight represent 3 to 6 years. So in addition to solving that problem that's already occurred, we want to make sure we prevent that from happening during 6 years and into the future. So it's about managing risk as well. Again, with WTA, it is our most productive transit route, and we have an unofficial policy or an agreement with WTA that we do whatever we can to work with our transit agency to maintain on-time service for bus routes, because if we don't, people will see transit as not a viable alternative. It's not as convenient. You can't count on the bus. We want to make sure we support our transit system as much as we make our roads work as well. So now we get into some slides looking at what the road diet analysis revealed to us, and these are pretty high level, but they really do paint a picture of what we found. Here's what the existing conditions look like, and in the red bars that you see on this slide represent vehicle queuing, meaning backups from the intersections. So this is what it looks like today, essentially. This is what would happen if we tried to do a comprehensive road diet from Cornwall all the way down to St. Clair, the other end of the project. It backs the traffic up very significantly, and key to that, of course, is what is the impact as traffic backs up into other intersections, and what's the negative impact to the transit system. Here's what it looks like with the modified road diet, which is just between the traffic signals, and again, you see a lot of backups and vehicle queuing, and again, negative impacts to the transit system. Although if we go to the hybrid road diet, which is what we're calling the application of a road diet on just the west end and on the east end in a little bit different configuration, it looks very similar to the existing conditions. And we could get into the details of that, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. Ultimately, what we ended up with was a recommendation for the hybrid road diet on the west end and the east end. On the west end, it would be the classic or traditional 4 down to 3 lane road diet with the addition of bike lanes. There's lower traffic volumes and less to transit down there. But on the east end, what we'd be doing is essentially just carrying the existing configuration on the Alabama Hill, which you can see in the picture on the right-hand side of this slide, where we already have a 2-way left turn lane. We've got 2 eastbound lanes going up the hill and 1 westbound lane going down the hill. And our proposal then is, and it ends at St. Clair at the bottom of the hill, our proposal is just to carry that forward another 3 or 4 blocks to Superior Street so that we get the benefit of the 2-way left turn lane in the center without the negative impacts associated with taking the entire road down to 3 lanes. So all of the alternatives moving forward from this recommendation are built on the hybrid road diet recommendation, and we'll walk through each one of these. The next 3 are kind of lumped together, though. We talk about multimodal transportation, and what we're trying to do with Alabama, in addition to reduce vehicle collisions, we heard loud and clear in the pedestrian master planning process in 2011 that Alabama was a big problem for a lot of different reasons. People can't get across the street if they live on one side of the neighborhood. Transit riders can't get across to the bus stops they need to get to. And then there's not many good bike connections or bike crossings. So the recommendation from the pedestrian master plan is, in fact, to do a road diet feasibility study and implement safety improvements. That's how we got here. So we looked at the situation, and of course Alabama has been identified as a barrier. It bisects neighborhoods. What we've done in the past is we've installed flashing crosswalks in a couple locations. On the left you see Grant Street. We did that in 2010, and St. Paul in 2012. These flashers work great, but when you go across 4 lanes of traffic, it still leaves some vulnerability. So we're looking at a bit of a different recommendation for the rest of the corridor, and that's something that we call these high-intensity activated crosswalks. The acronym is HAWK in the industry. We'll just call them HAWK signals for simplicity. But we're recommending that 4 of these be installed on the corridor from Interstate 5 moving east. 1 at Moore Street, 1 at Undine Street, 1 at Michigan Street, and I guess 3 of these, and a new signal at St. Paul, and we'll talk about that in just a second here. In the pedestrian master plan, this is the recommendation that was made for crossings. You can see one over here at Ellis Street, and there was one made at St. Clair, but when we took a closer look at the one at St. Clair in the bike master plan, we actually adjusted that down to Michigan. It was more centrally located. I also want to call your attention to the fact that there's other things called for in the pedestrian master plan, including recommendations for additional sidewalks on Texas and some of the other side streets. So those are on the priority list in the pedestrian master plan. When we got into the bicycle planning, as I mentioned, we made an adjustment to the St. Clair location. But on the west end, we're trying to support the bike boulevards that both go parallel to Alabama and the ones that cross Alabama. So a new crossing is recommended at Ellis Street, and that would be picking up the existing flasher at St. Paul, moving that down to Ellis Street, and then both Ellis and Grant would get center lane pedestrian refuges. So you can walk across 1 lane of traffic, stop halfway across, look to make sure traffic's not coming, and proceed to the second. On a 3 section, great, those flashers are not recommended for 4 lane sections. That's why we're moving to the different crossings. The east end, we're not talking about supporting bike lanes on Alabama. What we're looking at on the east end is getting people across Alabama. That's why we have a recommendation for a crossing at Michigan Street. But we do feel that the rechannelization can work quite well there. Adds the benefit of the 2-way left turn lane and some turn pockets into the side streets. And there's less volume on the east end, just like there is on the west end. We have a number of bike boulevard crossing improvements recommended in the bike plan, and as I mentioned, on the west end you've got Ellis Street. In the central part of the corridor we've got Moore Street, right on the east end of the bridge across I-5. A new traffic signal is recommended at St. Paul, and that's to support a bicycle boulevard recommendation for St. Paul, and a bicycle boulevard recommendation for Undine with a HAWK signal at Undine. The east end, I mentioned, there's the crossing recommended at Michigan with a HAWK signal. This is what those new crossings look like. They're all either signalized flashing crosswalks or HAWKs, or a new traffic signal at St. Paul. In addition to the recommendations for the crossings for pedestrians and transit riders, WTA, by the way, they're a funding partner of ours. They invested $5,000 in the study that we've been doing for the last year. They've committed to consolidating and relocating some of their bus stops on the north side of the street for the westbound direction on Route 331. And these are the new locations for the bus stops, and they're basically in conjunction with the new crossing locations so that transit riders can more easily get across the corridor and get right to where they need to get on the bus stop. There's one in between Valencia and Verona here that will remain. The one that's on the east side of St. Paul will be moved to the west side of St. Paul. The one that's currently on the west or east side of Orleans will be moved to the west side of Orleans. And then the one at the corner of James and Alabama will essentially remain in place. And then this one down at Grant Street, I believe they're moving it from the east side to the west side as well. But please make sure you look at the consistency of where the crossings are recommended. That's these yellow and black hatched lines. So it will support the transit function quite nicely as well. Where we can't do the road diet in the central portion of the corridor, we have to look at still solving the problem of reducing vehicle collisions, and then we turn to treatments that are generally termed access management. That can be anything from a raised C-curb median to turning restrictions or the addition of turn lanes. In the case of the central part of the corridor, we don't have the ability to add the turn lane all the way, and it's kind of a little bit counter to what we really wanted to do with this project and trying to use available right-of-way and kind of stay in between the curbs where we can. There is an exception to that, two actually, but one major one, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But turning restrictions and C-curb medians, again, like road diets, are proven countermeasures to reduce the vehicle collision, as are widening and providing turn lanes. There is already C-curb median on Alabama, and if you go down to the intersection of James and Alabama, this is what it looks like on the east side, right in front of Trader Joe's. This has been in place for quite a long time because it was not okay to have commercial driveways with people making turns in and out of the driveways into this heavy traffic situation. We're recommending some spot widening at St. Paul, as I mentioned. This would be the addition of a new traffic signal and actually some widening to allow left turn lanes to be built here. And that would help support both the bike boulevard, and that's what's shown in green here. Down here is Texas Street. This would allow people to get in these turn pockets and turn either way at St. Paul. So it does involve some widening, but we'll get the benefit of the left turn pocket and get the cars out of the travel lane. One of the other things we're talking about doing is looking at resurfacing the Alabama corridor. And this is for safety purposes essentially, but Alabama has risen on the pavement ratings list, and it's ripe for doing arterial resurfacing, so there isn't a better time to do it than 2015. And we'd like to take advantage of that situation and do the resurfacing at the same time we make all the physical improvements on the corridor. Finally, one of the alternatives that was shown to the public in 2013 was considering an examination of the speed limit. And I have up here that that's yet to be determined, and the reason for that is that we feel like there's additional study needed and that the actual effect of putting all these physical improvements in place will in fact reduce the speeds on the corridor. We're adding 5 new signalized crossings to the corridor. That'll make a grand total of 12 crossings on the corridor. So it will actually have the effect of making people start and stop and overall have an average longer time. It's not always going to be the case, but a lot of these signals are randomly activated, so it's pretty easy to see that when we get all these crossings in place, it's not going to be as easy for people to simply drive from point A to point B down the corridor. And that's the conclusion of the presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions now or after the
hearing. Any questions from council or staff at this time? Jack.
Just a process question. We'll have the public hearing. Did you have a work session scheduled, or were you thinking that we would be voting tonight?
Well, we anticipated that council would want to put this forward to a work session. If that is the case, we'd be prepared to come back on the 21st and have a detailed work session that go into much more detail about the recommendations and answer any other questions. So it's council's pleasure. We can certainly respond to questions tonight and provide more detail, but we were anticipating a work session.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to add just one more thing. I've given you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation as a handout, but I've also given you all of the public comment that we've received at the city from May of 2012 when we got the grant to Friday. So there's 17 pages of public comments there before you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Michael.
Chris, I have a question about the speed limit issue. One of the things apparently was studied was not just reducing the speed limit from 35 but down to 25, but also maybe down to 30, and there was no extra queuing that was shown on that. So I'm wondering why that was not still in the mix. And then related to that, if we're adding crosswalks and lighted sections, which will down time and shorten the distances can come up to speed. It seems that people are unlikely to come to 35 miles an hour anyway. It becomes a theoretical speed limit rather than an actual speed limit. Again, what is the harm in not going ahead and considering a lowering of the speed limit, say, to 30 if that upper limit is never practically reached? Why can't new crosswalks in the speed limit hand in hand than one and then maybe the other?
We have looked at travel time on the corridor, and there are times on the corridor today when a car can't get up to 35 miles an hour. It's very likely to be similar and perhaps even more of an issue in the future. But I think the more responsible thing to do is wait to see what happens with these physical improvements and find out where we're at that point to try to make any adjustments that need to be made at that point. We simply don't know what the actual effect of putting the improvements on the corridor are going to be at this point.
Okay, quick.
Can I ask about the accidents if they occur at the nighttime and during the day? And I'm doing this relative to speed limits. In practice, daytime, people don't actually go 35, and the 35 is really only reached at the morning when there isn't high traffic. Are these accidents daytime busy traffic accidents, or are they late at night accidents, which may be more speed related?
The majority of the collisions are, in fact, during the busiest times of day. That's when you have the most cars out there and when you have the most risk. So during the late evening hours and early morning hours, you wouldn't see as many collisions out there, and that's when you see your highest speeds as well. So the collisions that you're seeing up there are primarily during the busiest times of the day, but certainly all times of the day.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've got quite a lot of people signed up this evening, so I'm going to ask when I call your name that you come down and state your name for the record at the podium here. Please try to keep your comments succinct and as possible. It's true. The more people tend to peel off and go home and take kids and eat dinner and stuff. So it really is great if we can keep things as succinct as possible. It makes the most number of people be able to share their thoughts with us. Also, please refrain from responding to comments so that we can create a safe environment where everyone feels welcome and free to speak their opinion. And also, just to speak a little bit, but unlike the previous item where we held a public hearing and voted right, we have an item like this with a lot of interest and a lot of opinion and work done. We are very unlikely to vote on it at the same public hearing, and will most likely vote to put it over to committee. I can't say with definitiveness because I'm only one person, but I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. So I'm going to open the public hearing and ask Richard Pickard, Jeffrey Sather, and Sayala Ida to come down. Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Richard Pickard, and I live at 2601 Queen Street on one of the more than 200 residences that are located dead end street at the end onto Alabama. I will only be able to turn one way onto Alabama when they install seeker. It's a roundabout trip going in the other direction. When I want to turn onto my street, I have to drive past it and come back to it. I have one question for the council members, and that each of you vote on this traffic plan if you lived on one of these dead-end streets. Being a council member is no easy task, I'm sure. Representing so many different people in this large city is difficult. But I ask all of the council members to please act as the representatives of the many citizens of Bellingham who live on these dead-end streets. You are our only voice in this matter. Please consider many negative impacts this traffic plan will have on these citizens and many others, the side streets that get so much more traffic with people going around in circles. I believe with some small, intelligent changes, this traffic plan can still achieve its stated goals without negatively impacting so many of us. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for all the work and effort you put into making Bellingham a wonderful place to live.
Thank you. Jeffrey Sather.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Sather. Hello. So, I would like to say a couple things, if I might. The secret here is actually in conflict with the City of Bellingham Neighborhood Master Plan. And it is a punitive act on the part, if they pass this, Roosevelt neighborhood. It prevents from actually getting to our streets without going into other streets to accomplish that, going past streets, as he said. It'll cause a significant disruption in our lives and those who come to see us, friends, family, other neighbors around. You say? Go ahead? Okay. The data in the presentation of March 5th, in this case, this one, is a mishmash of data from multiple years, and then they put an average in here instead of a single year. And on this one, on the Alabama, it's from 2009. That's 5 years ago. It would be nice to see some current data. And so it sort of makes this somewhat irrelevant because the data is not consistent across years. And in this one, he's taken 4 years and averaged the data. So we don't have an actual yearly data on this. And a couple other things. The actual plan was not fully developed and not fully released until the March 5th meeting that they had. And so the public comment at that point was pretty minimal because none of us knew what was actually on the plan. The C-curb was not there until March 5th. It did not exist. So this plan is going to force the residents onto streets that are not equipped to handle the volume of traffic that's going to be there. These streets are undeveloped in the sense there's narrow, there's no sidewalks, there's no curbs, there's no gutters, and it's not well lit. And kids play on these streets. You're going to have delivery trucks, equipment, all numerous other kinds of vehicles on those streets that are going to compromise the safety of those streets significantly. Potential problems are monstrous. They're trying to solve a problem on Alabama by forcing it off onto the side streets. So, all because of this curb. The beauty is if you just get rid of the curb, all that goes away. And so, with the other problem, that's the collisions, like was stated earlier, is that the collisions occur predominantly at lighted intersections. And this is over a 6-year period. This is not 1 year. This is 6 years. And it also occurs mostly, apparently, during rush hours, which are 2 hours of every day. The rest of the time, they don't have this kind of problem. So I know that I hopefully speak for myself, and I hope to speak for the others in the room, and would like you all to take another look at that C-curve. It's a very detrimental thing, and it's punitive to our neighborhood. So we are at the effect of all this, and it's not, it just doesn't seem fair to us to have to go through this to solve a problem that doesn't really exist yet. Okay? So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. You have a great evening, and okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sayola, but should I skip? Okay. Kurt Ingram, followed by Terry Hall, and then Teresa Quinn. Come on down.
Good evening. My name's Kurt Ingram. I live on Undine Street, also a dead-end street off Alabama. I'm a pastor at Roosevelt Community Church and the vice president of Roosevelt Neighborhood Association. So I come here on behalf of our neighborhood, honestly, and we really appreciate the work that's been put into this, and we understand that there's all kinds of analysis and expertise, but from our vantage point, it seems to us like we're a neighborhood that's working hard to continue to try and create this unifying center. That we're a neighborhood that's historically struggled. We're one of the highest density populations. And so we see this curb as creating a highway that separates our neighborhood right down the middle. That's actually, even with these other things, we love crosswalks. We think you should put more street lights. But the main concern that we've agreed upon as a neighborhood is that C curb to us, it feels like it limits a lot of access. It feels like it doesn't actually help this become more of a neighborhood street. So we understand on a road like Lakeway or on Iowa or on Sunset why something like this works and makes sense, because it's not residential. But especially in our situation where we look at, on my street alone, there's 50 residential units on one street of these alone. And so you're pushing all of this traffic into our neighborhood that right now there's no business. This is a highly densely populated neighborhood where kids play on the streets. I understand there's a master pedestrian plan. I haven't seen anyone actually working on it in a while. Maybe that's just been somewhere that I haven't seen. But if you walk through our neighborhood, we have many streets that these cars are going to go on that don't have sidewalks, some that have deep ditches, that don't have streetlights, that have kids running around because we have tons of apartments. And so ultimately what happens is we push this traffic into our neighborhoods. We kind of cut off one side from the other. And we make it very inconvenient to live in our neighborhood. And so we just as a neighborhood want to ask you to, alongside of all the analysis the transportation has done, to bring to bear the values of our city and the values of neighborhood and the values of community. And what does that say would be best for our neighborhood? And again, when you look at the map, we look at Sunnyland, and to be honest, we're a little envious, and we wonder, and I understand we love WTA and we are grateful for their service, but we look at that and we say, man, it looks like they're getting this great gift and we're getting a highway. And that it just doesn't sit right with us. So we just want to come, and you're going to hear a lot more, but we want to share that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Terry Hall, followed by Teresa Quinn and Maureen Nelson.
Hi, I'm Terry Hall, and I'd like to thank all of the council members and the mayor and all of the staff for their work on this issue. I'm going to echo what a lot of folks have already said to you, but I'm going to read it because I wanted to keep it brief. On page 13 of Agenda Bill 20370, which you guys have in front of you, regarding the Alabama Street project, specifically the raised yellow curb preventing almost all left turns off the central section of Alabama Street, it states that the city recognizes that this creates an inconvenience to residents living on the north side of Alabama, but that alternate routes to homes and garages are available with fairly minimal travel time increases. What doesn't seem to be being recognized here is that this isn't just about inconvenience, although that is definitely a feature of the plan as it stands now. It also doesn't only affect residents living on the north side. I'm one of the dead-enders here, and it affects me greatly because I'm going to be driving 8 good blocks to get home every day and to go to work, and everyone who visits me is too. But it's not just us that are affected. Folks on the south side are affected as well. They can't take, that left turn either. The people that are going to see our cars, hundreds of cars, you guys have, I believe, received a letter from at least one citizen who did a count of how many cars Maryland, Pacific, St. Paul are going to see a day. Using a very conservative estimate, there are hundreds that are going to be on those streets. Those are, as has already been said, streets that are not developed now, are not going to be developed in the near future. I hear mention of this, but it's not in the near future. This is a now problem. We have kids on those streets. They are quiet residential streets. So it doesn't just affect, the folks right off Alabama. It is also something that I think does put a little freeway through our residential neighborhood. We're trying really hard to be a friendly, family-oriented, quiet neighborhood. We don't want a little freeway through it. We don't want a physical divider. This is a safety issue. It's, this whole thing is about safety. So if congestion is an issue, and that's what I hear, is that because congestion is going to be an issue, we're going to put the C-curve through the central part of Alabama. If congestion is an issue, maybe we need to look at routing cars off of Alabama onto more primary arterials. They exist, but people aren't taking them because it's not the way they want to go. It's not the easiest way for them. It shouldn't necessarily be the easiest way for them to commute right through a neighborhood. Punishing one neighborhood in terms of safety issues, convenience issues, property value issues, in order to ease the commute of folks that are using our corridor, just when they have other alternatives, isn't a fair thing for the city to do, in my opinion. So I'm going to join all of the Roosevelt supporters out here and urge you to rethink that C-curb. We would really like to see any other solution. We support WTA as well. I mean, lots of us ride the bus. But there's got to be another way to get this done without penalizing us in that way. That's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Teresa Quinn, followed by Maureen Nelson and Anna Shepard.
Yes, my name is Teresa Quinn, and I live at 2328 Queen Street. And the problem I see with the C-curb is it was recommended that people take a right-hand turn on Pacific and then turn left wherever, most likely Texas. Well, 6 times a day, there's school buses that stop on Texas and drops the kids off, picks them up in the morning, drops them off in the afternoon, and the kids just go running all over the place. And if everybody's rerouted onto Texas, I see more kids getting hit that way. And there's a major ditch on the south side of Texas that would eat cars up too. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Teresa. Maureen Nelson, followed by Anna Shepard and Charles Storrs. Maureen Nelson? Okay. We'll go on to Anna Shepard, followed by Charles Storrs and Frank Black.
Hi, I'm Anna Shepard, and I'm a resident of the Roosevelt neighborhood, as well as the assistant director of the child care center located on Undine Street, called Kids Corner. The director and I went to the neighborhood meeting regarding the proposed road changes on Alabama Street, changes that would directly affect us. Kids Corner serves many residents of the Roosevelt neighborhood, as well as commuters, and a high percentage of low-income families. We're also a Head Start partnership and take on a lot of foster families as well. As the voice of our parents and staff, I also speak in disagreement of the C-curb. Many of our families struggle financially, and they have a hard time getting their kids to school as it is. A C-curb would hinder our families from taking any left-hand turns onto Undine Street, forcing them to spend extra money on gas, which they don't have, and extra time using alternative routes. We also work with early intervention programs through the Bellingham School District, who provide additional support for students with IEPs in their developmental preschools. Many of the buses utilize the left-hand turn lanes to get into our center as well, and they are in and out all day, picking up students and dropping them off. We worry that the inconvenience to them will cause transportation services to be discontinued, and those children can't afford to lose their schooling in the public school district. As an advocate of our early childhood program, I would really like you guys to consider how damaging this could be for our center and for our kids. All of the families we serve have signed the petition against the C-curb, and as I mentioned, they are not only residents, but commuters, and I think we got even a few FedEx drivers as well. Our center would love to see more traffic lights. A reduced speed would be awesome. The proposed crosswalks are great. We just want the Roosevelt neighborhood to be viewed as a valued residential neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Next up is Charles Storrs, Frank Black, I believe, and Donna Guerin.
I'm Charles Torres. I live at 2626 Valencia, yet another dead-end street off of Alabama. I want to start by talking about the process. We have a grant tail that is wagging the planning dog. The money has to be spent on Alabama, and it can only be spent on safety. Well, if you look at their accident statistics, the accidents are occurring at the major intersections. Nothing is being done at the major intersections. If you take a bigger look at the way this city is set up, I-5 is chopping the city in half. You cannot easily cross I-5 at Meridian. You cannot easily cross I-5 at Sunset. There are immense numbers of people who come down Mount Baker Highway, turn on Woburn, and turn on Valencia. On Alabama. That is why the traffic numbers are so high on the center section of Alabama. So anything you're doing to fix Alabama is just not going to be a comprehensive solution. You're still going to have the huge number of accidents, and you're still going to be cutting off traffic to downtown Bellingham. So you've got all the downtown businesses are going to see a decrease in traffic when you make it less fun to come down Alabama. One of the things I haven't mentioned is the north-south connections. And somebody a long time ago lined up Pacific Street in Orleans as a north-south connection. So you have a big problem with accidents there because you have two traffic lights. Sometimes those lights are timed, and they go off at the same time. There are other times when they are not timed. And you can be sitting there looking at two reds. You see one go green, and you start driving. But guess what? That was a block ahead of you. You're now involved in an accident. I've got friends on St. Paul Street. It is a through street. The people there are quite happy with you not knowing that. We have one of the most successful bus lines. I think it is the most successful bus line going down Alabama. Every person who gets on that bus line at Alabama, one way or another, is going to be a pedestrian crossing Alabama. So we don't want freeways, and we don't want gridlocks, and some of them are pushing baby strollers, so the C curb is just nasty with a baby stroller. I don't want you to move the bikes. You're going to have the cars cross the freeway somewhere. So the bikes need to go somewhere else. You can put the bikes on Texas. You can put the bikes on Illinois. You can put the bikes on the bicycle trail. You can pave the bicycle trail and make it easier for the bikes who won't ride on gravel. Having bikes and everything else on Alabama is crazy. If you look at the notes on their bike plan, the bike trail is going to end a block short of Cornwall, and it's going to end a block short of James. So you have created bike lanes that don't connect at either end. And if that's not crazy. So the other thing is they put out an official map. It is a combination of a whole bunch of different sources. They will tell you that there is no through connection on East North Street. The fact is that they do have East North Street marked as a through road. So there's just a whole lot more planning they need to do, and if they want to look at a comprehensive situation, they got to look at a lot more than just Alabama. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Charles. Next up, Frank Black, followed by Donna Guerin and David Dops.
Good evening. My name is Frank Black. I live on 1714 Alabama Street. I'm one of the homes that potentially may lose some of the yard project. And I am in opposition to the project, but only the parts of it that run through the central Roosevelt neighborhood. The pedestrian crossings are all very much welcomed and very much needed, but the sea as it runs down Alabama through Roosevelt is just an eyesore. There's really no way around it. They are proportional in industrial and commercial neighborhoods, but they just simply do not look good in residential neighborhoods. I just urge you to please keep Bellingham beautiful and do not approve this project.
Thank you, Frank. Donna Guerin.
Hi, I'm Donna Gowron. I live on Queen Street between Alabama and the Interurban Trail. One of the things I have is a petition that's been signed by over 100 of our residents, and I'll just do the residents of Roosevelt neighborhood strongly object to the raised median C curb proposed as a safety solution for Central Alabama Street from King Street to Woburn Street. Thank you. First, I want to recognize the efforts that the planning team has put into making Alabama Street safer. The residents are overwhelmingly in approval of the 4 to 3 lane road diet planned for the Sunnyland end of the street, but overwhelmingly in opposition to the C curb that is planned for our section between Pacific and Woburn. And why is that? Well, first of all, because as we've heard, the C curb is inappropriate. It's not a traffic control solution that's appropriate for residential neighborhoods. It divides a community that is already struggling, and it creates an unfriendly and unwelcoming environment. Secondly, neighborhood safety. We cannot consider safety on this section of Alabama Street, just the street, in isolation from its neighborhood. The C curb diverts local resident traffic onto side streets that are not equipped for it. Nothing in the plan addresses the safety of these neighborhoods. There appears to be more concern for the drivers who use Alabama as a thoroughfare than for those of us who live in the neighborhood. Third, the sidewalks. The proposal does nothing to protect pedestrians on our sidewalks. I know that there are additional crosswalks, but we still continue to have no buffer between pedestrians and traffic that's traveling at 35 miles per hour or more. Finally, the 24/7 impediment. The proposed C curb is a 24/7 impediment to local residents who would normally make left turns into or out of our side streets. It not only prevents me from taking a left turn to work during the very brief Bellingham rush hour, it also prevents me from taking a left turn for the 20-plus hours each day when there is little or no traffic in either direction. So the question that needs to be asked here is not how can we make Alabama safer for the volumes of traffic it is attracting, but why are all these cars taking this residential corridor rather than utilizing by our towns? And it's to do what works. So I think it's time to look at some different alternatives than we've heard. First of all, Woburn, most commuters traveling our section, many commuters traveling our section of Alabama head north or south by the time they get to James. Improving Woburn from Illinois to Iowa would encourage them to make this north-south decision earlier and then not come down our central portion. Secondly, Alabama Hill. Extend Crestline to Barclay Boulevard. There's a dead end at Crestline right now, to give Alabama Hill residents traveling west or north a more convenient exit from their neighborhood, and then they wouldn't be coming down Alabama Hill through ours. Number 3, part of the problem is the entrance to I-5 South at Iowa. If I take Iowa to James, I can't take a left there to get to the freeway entrance. I'm forced to go the route along State Street. It's frustrating, so I take Alabama to James Street. And you can see how popular this option is by the backup of cars on James waiting to get through to the freeway. This area needs new thinking. Fourth, block backlane accesses to Alabama. There are 6 back lanes on the south side of Alabama between Pacific and Woburn, which also have access to Texas Street. Block those back lanes vehicle access to Alabama to increase safety on Alabama. And finally, eliminate that traffic light at Pacific Street. Reroute northbound traffic on Pacific left to Texas and then right onto Orleans. The double traffic lights are a huge impediment to travel. Eliminating the one on Pacific would significantly reduce congestion. So in conclusion, I'm calling you as our representatives to do 3 things. One is to recommend a modification of the plan to eliminate the C curb proposal in our section on Alabama. Secondly, extend the 4 to 3 lane road diet to our section of Alabama. And finally, pursue appropriate long-term solutions that improve the safety and livability of our neighborhood overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Next up is David Dobbs, followed by Robert Brown and Rick Nicholson.
I've expanded notes here for a couple folks. Hello, my name is David Dobbs, and I live at 2539 Racine Street, also one of the streets impacted by the C curbing. But I'm here as the Neighborhood Association president. And so, as council members, I'm sure you can appreciate the sticky position represents constituencies of emotional and rightfully so, possibly, citizens in your constituency area. I had a bunch of things I wanted to point out. I'm hearing now that they're becoming a bit redundant. I think you're getting the notion that the C-curb component of this plan is the part that the residents of the central part of Roosevelt are finding the most difficult to swallow. So I would like to step back from the sort of points about that, aside from possibly the reiteration of the side streets that will be absorbing this traffic are not currently adequately prepared to deal with them. They are often unsidewalked or ditched streets with children. Texas Street in particular. Texas and Illinois both had traffic circles put on them recently because the Planning Department and Public Works recognized the high-speed traffic cutting through them, deliberately trying to slow those down. So now you're wanting to push traffic back onto those streets. Teresa Quinn pointed out exactly the problem with Texas also being the amount of children there, both because of the high density and also because of the school routes. So those sorts of impacts on the side streets really are a much bigger impact than just addressing the issues on the Alabama corridor itself. I would hope that you would appreciate why the citizens of Roosevelt have historically felt a bit like the underdog in the city. They have often felt underserved and have felt a bit neglected in their wishes and desires for an improved community. In the last 5 years in particular, and for a number of years past that, we should all appreciate the work that the Public Works and the Planning Department and the City Council have done to push improvements in our neighborhood, and we vastly appreciate that. The improvement for pedestrian crossings and the bicycle crossings are going to be an immense improvement to our neighborhood for the viability of those people getting around, not having to use vehicles. And so we appreciate the amount of work that has gone into this. It's a substantial amount of effort balancing a lot of interests, but the residents in the central core of Roosevelt feel like they are getting the short end of the stick. And for all the reasons that you guys have heard already, this is going to end up being either a wash or a backtrack as far as their trust in the city doing right by them. We all should appreciate that there are going to be additional crosswalks, particularly at where there's a daycare center that has been needing a crosswalk there for years. The other crosswalks, all improvements that we appreciate. I'm not so sure about the folks that are going to appreciate the St. Paul traffic light, but it still will be an improvement overall to the traffic. But the effect of a C-curb having the appearance of something that is typically done in a commercial zone, done to a residential zone, will simply exacerbate the notion that Roosevelt is a place to get through quickly, particularly if you're going somewhere else. And the numbers alone show that a large number of people are coming down from Berkeley, essentially, to Alabama, and traveling Alabama instead of taking Berkeley Boulevard, which was put in specifically for Berkeley transportation. I'm hearing that there are other folks from places south of Alabama who are complaining about decreases in commuter time on Alabama because of this project. Those folks have Iowa Street and Lakeway that are routes that should be taken instead. So if these folks, by the nature of the improvements, the other improvements being recommended here, choose to take those other more appropriate routes home, we may have less traffic on Alabama anyway, additionally reducing the need for the C-curb. Again, you know, it's a matter of perception. A lot of the folks have felt like this was brought up quickly, last minute, not adequately aired to the neighbors for consideration, and this is our first opportunity to bring our voice out. And so I hope that you hear those, take them to heart, and I addressed most all of the points that neighbors have brought to me in detail in what I believe to be a fairly balanced way. I'm a planner wannabe, and I actually have spent a fair amount of time, much to the frustration of my association, defending the city and the planning department and the public works department, trying to explain their rationales for folks, but some things still come up short, and the C curb in particular will radically change the character of the neighborhood. So we implore you to consider some other options. They may include not spending all the grant money and knocking all those safety numbers down, and considering other things that may do bits and pieces of it. Reducing the speed limit is another consideration. Thank you again. I know you have hard decisions. We appreciate all the work that's been done. Thanks for the future work that we'll be doing.
Thank you very much, David. Next up is Robert Brown, followed by Rick Nicholson and Scott Watling. Okay. Rick Nicholson, and then Scott Watling and Don Ernest.
Good evening. Rick Nicholson. I'm the Director of Service Development at WTA. And first and foremost, what I want to say is just appreciation to city staff in particular. We've been involved, as Chris mentioned, in this process from the beginning. We were a small funding partner in this review that's going on. And the relationship that we have with the city is really just top-notch. And we are the envy of many other transit properties, I can tell you that. The biggest issue that WTA has really with Alabama, and Chris mentioned it a couple times, is this route, the 331 route, is the highest ridership route in the system, period. More people ride this route than any other route. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's approaching 750,000 boardings a year, just on the one corridor. So on this one route, not all on the Alabama corridor, but on the route as a whole. It's also a route that is struggling to stay on time in the afternoons significantly, and we get more complaints about this route running behind schedule in the afternoon than any other route. So we're very sensitive to that, not because for any other reason other than people need to have confidence in the transit system that they're going to get to the transit station or wherever they need to go so they can transfer to other routes, other buses that they need, or get to work or get home, whatever that is. So if we can't provide a consistent way of operating on time, we lose the confidence of riders, and ultimately our ridership will go down. So being able to stay on time on this corridor and on the route as a whole is very important. And there's no easy fixes for this route to just find time somewhere else. If the running time on this corridor significantly got reduced, we would be struggling. The additional crosswalks, the additional light on St. Paul, that is going to slow us down. But we have made the calculation that that's okay, because we are also, like with the neighborhood, the folks that are riding WTA are residents of the neighborhood, and they need to get across the street safely. So safety trumps whatever decrease in running time we may have for that, and we have no problem with that. I would caution City Council, though, that when you do the review that looks at the potential speed limit, whether or not it might get reduced, that I'm sure I will be back when that public hearing happens for that. But a reduction in the speed limit to, say, 25, which I know some people have been advocating, not here tonight, I haven't heard, but elsewhere, that really does begin to have an effect on WTA and on route. Not that that's the only consideration, but it's one that the city would have to enter into with their eyes open, because I don't know how we would mitigate the lost running time on this route if that were to happen. Again, that's not a part of this proposal tonight, but that's just a heads up possibly for the future. And that being said, I'll close. The only other thing I want to mention about the C-curbs is that the C-curbs really don't affect WTA. A couple people have alluded to the fact that maybe WTA was in support of that. We are in support of the process. We are in support of the plan that staff have presented, but the C-curbs don't affect WTA one way or the other, just that specific part of the plan. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Scott Watling, followed by Don Ernest and Pat McKee.
Hi there, my name is Scott Watling, and I live on Undine Place. And I will be affected by the C-curb and oppose the C-curb, but people have done a good job of letting you know the reasons why. I'd like to talk specifically about my experience with some safety issues, if I will, and their connection to that. One, I feel that the C-curb will increase the speed of the cars and kind of give them the license, since it does make it a freeway type atmosphere, to go faster. Off-peak hours, that's a high-speed corridor. It's not 35 miles an hour, and it's variable to whatever someone wants to go to reach kind of the end of it, and that's an issue. As a pedestrian, my experience, I'm grateful for the crosswalks and the lights, but my experience is that the higher the speed for the cars coming, the less they're going to respect those crosswalks. And the lower speed, the more they are. So with the C-curb and the higher speeds that I think that will come with it, I think those crosswalks will be less respected and less safe than they are with more manageable speed. The other thing is that sidewalk is, and I think it's been mentioned before, very close to the cars going that speed, and you can pretty much take out a family of people on that sidewalk just by hitting, going over the curb with one wheel. Whereas if there was a road diet and there was space to expand the curb so that it would take more wheels jumping the curb to get to the sidewalk, that would increase safety as well. And finally, the other safety issue I have is that if that curb is in place, there are times when I want to access parts of my community that are very close, but I don't want to walk because it's dark and I don't feel it's safe around the trail. So I will drive to those places. And I've always been able to make a left-hand turn onto Alabama to get to the Hagens or the movie theater or what have you. And if that's not available, then I have to make a right-hand turn and then go in the dark through residential neighborhoods to get to the same thing. And that would give me a safety concern as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Don Ernest, followed by Pat McKee and Cindy Pearson.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity here to speak to members of the Bellingham City Council. My name is Don Ernest. I reside at 2518 Racine Street, just 3 doors north of Alabama Street, and I am a block watch co-captain for the 2500 and 2600 blocks of Racine Street. I have yet to meet anyone in the Racine Street area who agrees with the decision to install a C-curb down the middle of Alabama Street. Moreover, at the last meeting of the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association, everyone present was unanimously opposed to the C-curb, and a petition which you've received has been circulated to prevent its installation. Residents who usually make left turns from Alabama Street to access their homes will have to drive through side streets to become oriented for right turns. This has been mentioned several times. This not only presents a nuisance to the local population, but will also result in overflow traffic on other residential streets not designed for heavy traffic. A center curb will also obstruct emergency vehicles. I haven't heard that mentioned yet. A better solution is to create a 3-lane corridor, the 3-lane diet that's been mentioned, with 1 lane in each direction and a middle lane for left turns. Avoid bicycle lanes on Alabama Street and use the extra space for turnouts for bus stops. If there is really so much concern for safety, it should be recognized that bicycle traffic is not compatible with heavy automotive traffic. Bicyclists should use side streets and greenway paths because it is simply safer to do so and avoids the problem of obstructing motorized traffic. I might add that many bicyclists are quite careless and run stop signs and red lights and weave in and out of traffic. Another suggestion: synchronize traffic lights throughout the length of Alabama Street for a reasonable speed. This will help maintain a smoother flow of traffic and will save time and fuel. frequent starts and stops increase fuel consumption and waste people's times. Thank you for your attention. Respectfully submitted, Don Ernest.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Next is Pat McKee, followed by Cindy Pearson and Riley Sweeney.
Good evening. My name is Pat McKee. I live on Grant Street in the Sunnyland neighborhood. I am the Sunnyland Neighborhood Association representative on the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Commission. I'm here tonight to support the West End solution to the Alabama corridor problems. I'm speaking about the solution that is proposed between Cornwall Avenue and James Street, and that is the section of Alabama Street that is going to get a road diet. This is something that my neighborhood has been calling for a number of years. The Alabama Street runs right through the middle of the Sunnyland residential area. On both sides of Alabama Street, the predominant housing form is the single-family house. Our neighborhood is a neighborhood in transition. There are young families buying homes in Sunnyland, putting down roots, and raising families. We have many children in our neighborhood. We have children who walk to the Sunnyland Elementary School. If you're born in Sunnyland and raised in Sunnyland, you can also walk to your middle school on F Street and to your high school on Cornwall Avenue. The point I'm trying to make is that every school day in Sunnyland, there are children trying to safely cross Alabama Street. And the solution that is being proposed will make it easier to safely cross Alabama Street, not only for school children, but for everybody in the neighborhood. The current conditions are so unsafe. We have parents who have come to our neighborhood and told us they will not allow young children to walk on the sidewalks alongside of Alabama Street because there is no barrier between the sidewalk and the travel lanes. There's no grassy strip. It's just sidewalk and a WTA bus going 35 miles an hour adjacent to the sidewalk. It's not safe. This solution will push the travel lane going east and the travel lane going west away from the sidewalk, at least 5 foot from the sidewalk. That will now be a bike lane. So the pedestrians walking along the sidewalk will have this barrier between them and the travel lane. A pedestrian trying to cross Alabama will only have 2 travel lanes and a center turn lane. It'll be easier to cross Alabama Street, and we'll get 2 pedestrian crossings, one at Grant Street and one at Ellis Street, and I believe both will have center lane refuges, which will make it much safer to cross Alabama Street. The one complaint that I have about the solution is it does not lower the speed limit. I agree with all of the comments that I've heard tonight. 35 miles an hour is too fast. If this project is about safety, which I think is why the Public Works Department got the grant, I think the most sensible thing you can do is lower the speed limit. Most of the arterials that go through the older center city neighborhoods, and I'm talking Cornwall Avenue, I'm talking James Street, I'm talking Sunset Drive, I'm talking State Street, they're all 25 miles an hour. So why aren't we considering lowering the speed limit to 25 miles an hour? I really feel that the people from the Roosevelt neighborhood who have fears that the proposed solution is going to turn the section of Alabama Street between James Street and Woburn Street into an unsafe situation, I think they're right. And not only inconvenient, but unsafe, because now you're not going to be able to make a left-hand turn only at a lighted intersection. People are going to know that they can just fly through there. So I support the West End solution, and I don't support the solution east of James Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Cindy Pearson, followed by Riley Sweeney. And anyone else who would like to speak, please do come down at this time and form a line.
Hi, I'm Cindy Pearson. I live on Verona Street, and I'm one of the dead enders that you've been hearing from. Verona Street, yes. I just recently learned about this C-curb proposal, and I was very amazed that a city who has so recently embraced the idea of the roundabout being an efficient means of getting through intersections quickly, safely, would even consider a proposal like this that would create a barrier to easy, efficient travel, flow of traffic. I'll be brief. Just to reiterate everything you've heard already, please don't sacrifice our quiet neighborhood for an increase in traffic that would loop around through these quiet neighborhoods. The left turn lane will always be busy. If you're creating a barrier, there's going to be extra people turning left in all these fewer spots that you want to create a left turn, whether they're doing a U-turn, whether they're going around the block and invading into these neighborhoods. Either way, the left lane is always going to be clogged. So why not just turn it into the left turn lane, storage lane, give people an easy, efficient access to their streets, and eliminate the need to flood this traffic out into other areas that are not viable for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Riley Sweeney. Okay. I think, yeah, we saw Riley leave. So, okay, we're at the end of our list. So whoever is lined up, please step up to the mic and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Leslie McDaniel, and I live on Valhalla Street. Does anybody know where that is? Well, it's right off St. Paul, dead ends on both ends. I am in favor of the road diet. I like the idea of no bike lanes, and let's improve the railroad bike route so that it could go, because it dead ends right behind Sunnyland, and then I don't even know where it starts again. But that would be a safe road for bikes. I think by putting, I'm against the Meridian. I think it should be a road diet all the way, put in the extra crosswalks, the hawks. I think, and maybe reduce the speed to 30. I think you would slow down. And a lot of people would then go, wow, it's way too slow on Alabama. I'm going to go down to Iowa, where it's 4 lanes and there's only one light down there. I also think that instead of spending as much money, you really ought to widen Woburn from Illinois down to Alabama. There's a real bottleneck there. And also, I don't know if you've looked at your maps really close, but if you go straight up St. Paul and you get to Illinois, you've got to make a right and then a little left to keep going on St. Paul if you're going up to Barkley. And I realize some people would rather go down Barkley, and I know you can't widen it up there, but let's see. Yeah, I think I said everything on my list. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome. Come on up.
My name is Susan Ediger Bloom, and so I just want to thank the Bellingham Council for letting us come give public comment, and appreciate that we get a grant to have. I didn't even know this was happening until about a few days ago, and I got this thing on my windshield saying that there's a potential to have a curb put in, and so I feel kind of out of the loop. So all the studies, sorry, I'm new. However, I have lived on Valencia 2601 since 2006, and I do know of the resident issues simply because I'm a pedestrian and I'm a bicyclist on Alabama, and I drive a car. So I see people crossing in the middle of the street all the time to get to their bus stop or getting off the bus, and so that is a big issue. So I'm glad it's being looked at. So I just moved to Toledo Street, which is another nice dead-end street, just this month, and am concerned about, from this C curb, just even on the aspects, someone mentioned the first responders or emergency, if that's in the middle of this major thoroughfare, how that's going to affect first responders to me on Toledo Street, as well as other neighborhoods. And I just was really hoping to find out more about the study on lowering the speed limit, considering I represent 3 other people who are thinking that was the best idea, is just lower the speed limit, see what happens with that, and then go forward with a lot of the other developments as they go, because that seems like maybe the cheapest, just put up a sign and then hire more police, or I don't know. So I guess the congestion for the C curb, the traffic into dead-end roads, and how people will be circling around trying to get to where they need to go. And the first responders, I guess that's just, I know that the speed limit's a big thing. People don't go 35, they go 40, and they go 45, and even 50, even in crazy rush hour things, they do. So if it went down to 30, I don't know how, and then considering the WTA, that's going to be a big thing. But more study on that. Just really look into that. Okay, I guess that's, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Morgan Dewey, and I live at 2626 Toledo Street. I'm newly married, and my husband and I just purchased a home on Toledo. We've lived there about 1.5 years. Love the community, love the neighborhood, wouldn't change it at all. However, it's going to be changed. And we really feel that had there been a C curb in place, we wouldn't have purchased the street. Deter young families like ourselves, we're hoping to have kids. I don't know any young family who's going to want to raise along an Alabama freeway. I completely support everything else everyone else has said before me. However, I'm a numbers person, so I want to add some numbers to some of it. Last night, my husband and I took the path that we would take to get to our home. Toledo is a dead-end street. So we would go St. Paul, Illinois, Woburn, back on Alabama, and then a right on. In our travel, it added an extra half a mile. It also added, so if it was a half a mile, and let's pretend, I get 20 miles per gallon, roughly. That's about 40 trips leaving our house. So in between soccer games and going to the hardware store, I'm a teacher, so going to school, coming back. My husband is self-employed. Those trips, we probably average about 3 trips a day in and out of our home. So with that, that's 13-ish days on 1 gallon of gas. Doing the math, that's about 28 gallons a year for one of our cars. Just if you multiply that by the thousands of people that live in our community, that's 28,000 gallons of gas a year. And I know that we are a very much an environmental community, but think about that environmental toll. That's 28 gallons for one car. Multiply it by the amount of people are here. Some of our communities have 3, 4 cars, people that are driving. I do the math. Another tool, if we are a family-conscious community, that 5 minutes, 3 trips, that's 15 minutes a day, 15 minutes. If I multiply it out, it's about 5,475 minutes a year, just for one car. If I kind of break it down a little bit more, that's 90.25 hours for me, just me, away from my family, away from my friends, away from my home. 90.25. That's almost 4 days, away from our home. Please don't penalize our community. That's 365 days a year, 24 hours, 7 days a week, that we're going to be penalized. Please don't do that. Please don't deter young families like ourselves from moving into this community. I thank you for taking the initiative and taking the time to try and make our corridor safer. I really appreciate that. But please don't penalize us.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joseph Brown, Valencia Street. I wonder if we could bring up the graph of the highest accident area on Alabama for a second, the number one. Could we pop that up? I don't have a lot of numbers, just one number. And we had a safety meeting. I live right on the corner where I believe the highest, the graph that shows the highest accident.
Thanks, Chris.
Not this one. Yeah. I'll tell you what I've observed. I appreciate you people studying this for a while. There you go. I've studied this for 17 years. I live on Valencia. The only number I have is number one. Now, as many of our neighbors have mentioned, the commuters that are piling in off of coming down Woburn, they hit that corner and they turn right and they do 0 to 50 in 3 seconds. You partner get run over. If you're on Valencia where I am, I take my wife to Hagen in the morning. Sometimes she does like a 5, 6 o'clock shift. And when I turn that corner, I put my blinker on as soon as I turn right on Alabama because I'm going to get run over because I've got to turn off. So these people are just zooming around that corner, and we've got to slow them down. They're hitting that thing, and they're doing 45, 50 miles an hour. As soon as, and what do they see when they get around a corner? The bus. And I've personally witnessed about 4 wrecks. And I've driven truck all over the western states. I'm a retired driver. I've never seen a situation that's so dangerous. I hold my breath because here's these people unloading off that bus. They're coming around at 50 miles an hour. Boy, they're going to town. And I'm just really thankful we haven't had more kids killed because that intersection has to be slowed down, especially when they make that corner. I think a reduction in speed is very appropriate if we're going to talk safety. That's the number one area. And so that number one, that's the only number I have that really seems to bother me. The bus stop, I don't know if WTA could, to me, it's too close to that corner. They don't have enough reaction time. Those people make that right turn, they slam on a brakes because there's a bus, or they're trying to zoom around it to get into town. It seems like it could be moved down. At least a half a block would be a very safe thing to do. I don't know if it's feasible, but when they come blasting around that corner, there's the bus right there unloading. My wife rides it sometimes, and it seems if it could be moved down, it would be a lot safer situation. That's what I had regarding safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Walsh, and I've lived in Bellingham for only about 6 months, but I've lived in the Pacific Northwest for a few years, and I moved here from Seattle, and I love Seattle. Seattle's so awesome and beautiful, but it was a little too complicated, and I wanted to move somewhere where I found the beauty of the Pacific Northwest, but on a smaller scale where I could just get around easily, and that's what Bellingham is to me. It's not complicated. It's beautiful. It's homey neighborhoods. I live on Undine Street, and it's a perfect little neighborhood, and there's more kids running around on the street than you can imagine. There's little kitty cats running around and puppies, and it's just like a little heaven. And I don't know why you would want to make it more complicated with putting in the C curve. It just seems like that's why Bellingham is awesome. Is because it's not complicated, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, and we should make it more safe by doing things like putting in speed limit, really paying attention to things we really need. But I think a C curve would make it more complicated, make things more dangerous, and take away from the reasons why I love Bellingham. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lena Benahoff. I also live on Undine Street, and I commute off of that road. It's also a dead end. We live in the cul-de-sac on Undine Lane right off of Undine Street, and there's no other route onto that road except off of Alabama. And I think the C-curb would just really be a hindrance and a safety issue, and I know there are a lot of people in the audience today that are part of the Roosevelt neighborhood that don't want to see the C curb in there. And I just really ask that you hear our voices and just know that the C curb is not a viable solution to the traffic problems that are occurring on Alabama Street. Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's anyone else who would like to speak in the public hearing, please do come down at this time.
Hi, I'm Kelly Peterson, 2536 Queen Street. I've lived on Queen Street for 17 years, raised my daughter there. Everybody here has said very valuable things. We've heard some things more than once, so I won't repeat much. I will reiterate that safety on the surrounding streets is our greatest concern. Convenience. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I didn't hear. One was public process for the last 2 years. Each presentation that we heard pretty much included, it could look like this, it could look like that, there could be some of this, and there could be some of that. But never until March 5th did we actually hear, this is what we propose, and the C curb was new at that point. So we were informed that things were being studied, but we didn't have anything on which to comment concretely until March 5th. That's why we've been so busy commenting. I'd like to point out another concern is our property values. When a real estate agent goes to show someone a house and they have to drive 8 blocks out of the way and all the way around, it's going to kind of lessen people's interests. I'm not planning to sell ever, but some of my neighbors might. And the final point I'd like to say is I live along the East-North Street right-of-way. I don't want to see East-North Street put through as a street, but I think before they put that C curve in, they better open up that street so that we're not driving on Maryland, St. Paul, Illinois, and Texas Street instead of left turning off of Alabama. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm Cheryl Smith. I live on Valhalla off of St. Paul. And I wonder if the school was a part of the study at all, because there's 6 bus stop times on that small section of St. Paul, and all from the streets usually get to St. Paul. It's a narrow street, a bus, a car cross past each other on the street right now. And we have 300 extra cars a day coming on that street during rush hour, which is the same time that the buses are going to be there, because the school buses don't stop on Woburn because it's not safe, and they don't stop on Orleans because it's not safe. They're on St. Paul, where it is safe now, but I don't know if it will be with that much breakthrough traffic that can only turn there. So my concern is with kind of how does the school fit in with all this and the children and bus stop. I don't see it happening well this way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kirk Roberts. I live on Moore Street. I want to thank the council for your time. I also want to thank Chris Coe, not only for his work on this, but also for talking to me personally over the phone about this plan. I thought that was great use, and I thank you and your staff for that. And my Roosevelt friends and neighbors, thank you for coming. I also want to thank the guy from the Sunnyland neighborhood. I thought it was terrific they came up here and talked and was so grateful about the road diet that's being put in there. And wouldn't you all like to see all of us Roosevelt people come in and go, we're really grateful for what you're doing to our neighborhood? And Chris has explained why the road diet he doesn't feel it's appropriate for that stretch of Alabama. I get that. He's the expert. I'm not. All I can say is that years ago when we first looked at this plan and we were looking at a road diet, the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association was so enthused about this plan. We wrote to you guys. We wrote to Chris. We were like, wow, this is great. It's going to the neighborhood. It's going to be safer. This is terrific. And although I know Chris is the expert, I also look at this and go, our neighbors, we know what we're talking about. We know what we're talking about in our neighborhood. So I would just ask for you to listen to take that into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Okay, last call. Anyone else? Last call.
Hi, my name is Heather, and I live on Nevada Street. I've lived there for about a year and a half. And the one thing I haven't heard all night is everyone's been talking about all of the cars and the bicycles and the buses and the pedestrians and everything. When I learned how to drive, my dad told me, I would rather see you hit a car than hit a person. And all the studies, these are all car collisions. I don't care how many car collisions there are, as long as we don't see people getting hit. And we're going to see people getting hit by cars if they're forced onto the side streets. And I think it's way more dangerous than, I don't care how many car collisions there are. It can't compare to one person being hit by a car. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if I don't see anyone else. Lovely enthusiasm, yeah. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close this public hearing and turn to council.
I move we send this to committee, probably the Public Works, Public Safety Committee, for further study.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Jack?
I wanted to, well, I think we should also have maybe an opportunity for the staff to maybe respond to some of that right now.
Why don't we do that at the work session?
People are here, and usually what we do in our is at least, you know, just, you don't have to do them, but
well, if you do one, you need to do them all. I'm just saying that's
well,
why.
That's what we do.
That's fine.
Anyway, one of the things that besides that, one of the things I would like to do is I'd like to put together a memo that I will submit to Chris and the rest of the staff that outlines some of the questions that I have based on what I've heard tonight and some other things that I have that I wanted to give to you so that you'd be prepared. If we're going to do, April 21st is what you're thinking? That I'll try and do that tomorrow and get it to you.
Okay, thanks, Jack. So if anyone else would also like to submit questions this week would be best, I'm assuming. Anything else you want to add, Tim?
No, that's absolutely fine. And the 21st is what we were thinking we could do. It's not urgent that it comes on the 21st. What our timeline is we'd like to have the improvements approved by council prior to the TIP process, which will start in May. So we are getting up against it. So we'd like to come back on the 21st. We would welcome any comments that the council has. You can certainly send them to me in writing via email. I'll make sure that the staff gets them and that we respond. The other thing we could do, if you wanted to keep the written record open until the 21st, we sometimes do that, close the hearing for tonight. I know people have already submitted some comments, but we could keep it open until the 21st as well, so that over the next couple weeks we could get more written comment. We will certainly be prepared to respond to everything we heard tonight and go through some alternatives and things that we can talk about. Obviously, the primary concern raised tonight was the access management portion of it through the central portion of the corridor, and we can talk about other solutions that we looked at, why we're recommending the C-curb and some of the challenges with the other things, but certainly open it up for discussion and input from the council.
Okay, sounds good. Michael and then Terry.
No, actually, Ted addressed what I was.
Okay. Terry?
I was just going to say I do agree with Jack. Usually we do offer staff the opportunity to respond to some of the stuff they've heard while people are here. And
well, I'm not opposed to staff. Do you have any burning desires to respond to certain items?
Well, we can talk about, if the council wishes, we can talk about the access management a little bit tonight. We can certainly go into more detail on the 21st. But as Chris mentioned in his presentation and what came out of the report is the volumes and some of the other complexities of the central portion of the corridor. There were some challenges with going from 4 to 3 lanes there in terms of queuing at the signals, congestion, WTA's performance. So we did consider it. We don't believe that it's the best option there. So as we looked at the other alternatives, Access management obviously is a proven technique. You're eliminating that conflict. The other things that we can look at is widening the entire corridor, so creating a 5-lane section through there, a 2-way left turn lane, which would extend throughout that whole center section, building on St. Paul, going both east and west. That has challenges as well, and they're not just the cost. There's also challenges on the adjacent properties along Alabama. We're impacting them where we may need additional right-of-way, likely will need right-of-way, will likely cause access issues for them. But we can talk about that in more detail, the costs associated with that, why we didn't believe that that was the best solution given our overall transportation goals, and we can go into more detail on the 21st. Someone mentioned tonight the opportunity for additional connectivity to the north, which is the east-north right-of-way, which is unopened through sections of that area. We looked at that as well, but that's something that we haven't talked with the neighborhood about. It warrants a lot more discussion with the neighborhood if we're talking about opening that access or that unopened right-of-way, which has been closed and people purchased on the thinking that that would not be open, but it is right-of-way, and there is an opportunity there to build a residential connection that would certainly address some of these access concerns, and we can talk about that in more detail, what we think that might look like. What our plan was on east-north was to have those larger, broader discussions as part of the update to the comprehensive plan, because that's talking about a new connection. What I'd like to do is focus on the 21st on the access management portion. Obviously, that's the biggest concern from the neighborhood. We can also talk about the speed limit. That's something that came up a few times tonight. And speed limit's a funny thing. A speed limit is a reflection of the characteristics of the corridor. It's very challenging to artificially create a speed limit lower than what people want to drive, and how fast people drive is entirely dependent on the number of intersections, the number of conflicts, the access points, cuts, all those things, across the signals, all of those patterns. That's why we wanted to make whatever improvements are recommended by the council and then look at the speed limit, because it's quite possible we believe the speed limit will come down. I know that's counter to what people talked about tonight. So we can talk in more detail about that and have the traffic operations engineer to answer any questions about how we look at speed limit, how we calculate and recommend speed limits. I think those are those are probably the primary concerns that we heard tonight. We heard also a lot about what are the impacts to the side streets if people are forced to take a different route to get to the destination back home. What does that do to volumes on streets like Texas and Illinois? And what does that mean when we look at how those streets are improved now or not improved to maybe a full standard with sidewalk, curb, gutter? And we can talk more about that and give some details on what we believe the volumes would be, what some of the future plans for pedestrian connectivity might be through those streets. So I really do think a work session is most appropriate. If council has any questions tonight that you want us just to respond to, we'd be happy to do that. But for me to try to go through all of them right now, I don't want to miss everyone sitting here, and I also want to make sure we have enough time to give a detailed response. I will make one clarification, because there was a comment about these accidents all being vehicular accidents. It's actually all accidents within the corridor. So it could be a vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle accident as well.
I'm inclined to keep the record open until the 21st. That's okay.
Written record?
Yeah, written record. So folks can still comment in writing to us until the 21st. And then we'll have a work session in the Public Works Committee, which is usually at 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and
9 in the morning.
And obviously, again, at your pleasure, we'd be more than happy to come to Public Works. We were also discussing amongst ourselves, would it be appropriate to come to Committee of the Whole? Either way, it's obviously up to you. We can come to Public Works and then maybe recap at Committee of the Whole or in the evening. But I just wanted to throw that out.
Okay. We'll talk about that. We might prefer Committee of the Whole at this point. Well, okay. So the motion is to refer it to Public Works.
Well, I just threw that in. I made a motion, but that would be the logical place for it to go. I mean, that's
correct.
just.
Yeah. Pinky?
I would prefer that it went to committee of the whole. I do live in this neighborhood. I drive down this street every day, and I feel very vested in it, and I would prefer that it went to committee of the whole.
I'm going to jump in real fast, if I may, Jack.
Sure.
I want to know about this too, and it was presented to all of us. However, this is why we have committees, and I have the freedom to attend any committee. So I'm inclined to say let's use our committee system. Jack, did you want to add anything?
You just said what I was going to say.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to refer this to Public Works Committee on the 21st. All those
Before you do that, it does not have to be at 9 o'clock in the morning, does it? It can be at 10:30, or it can even be in the afternoon, whatever works out for you.
That's definitely true, and especially depending on the schedule of the
Just
day.
saying, for everybody involved, public and
Yes, I've showed up at 9 o'clock.
So stay tuned to the exact time we settle on.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I don't know. Who's the second?
Who was the second?
Harry, were you
Harry
the
and
second?
Pinky.
Yeah.
Combined, they both get.
Give it to Pinky.
She hasn't had one yet. It was me and
Yeah.
Pinky.
Jean moved and Pinky seconded.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's just so hard to hear.
Speak up, folks. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. Jack?
Yeah, it probably would be at 9 because I know that the planning committee is going to be meeting at 10:30.
Oh, that's right. So it would be at 9.
We'll probably do our normal committee structure at that point.
Probably. Okay, anything else on this item? Okay, thank you all very much. We're going to move on now to our regular business. Okay, folks, if you have conversations, please do take them outside council chambers because we're going to continue with our business. That's fine, yeah. Okay, Committee of the Whole. We had 3 items this afternoon. And I'm going to experiment with using our new system here.
Thanks for the protection, guy.
Okay, bringing it back. Okay, our first item this afternoon was a multi-jurisdictional resolution regarding the 2036 population and employment allocations. The Growth Management Act requires the county and the cities to work together to adopt population and employment growth forecasts that are used in the process to update comprehensive plans. And this afternoon, we passed a resolution adopting agreed-upon numbers with the county and other small cities, and I believe it was 6-1 with Mr. Lilliquist in opposition. Sorry.
Little quiz.
Anything else anyone wants to add on that report out? We had a lively discussion this afternoon on population process. We also then moved and passed unanimously a resolution to request the administration bring us a resolution asking, oh boy, what did we say? Directing, bring us a resolution that asks the county to look into and make some progress on mechanisms that would reduce the opportunities for rural growth.
Working with the others.
Working with the small cities as well. Yeah. Okay. The second item we had this afternoon was a presentation from city staff from the planning department. Sorry,
We
Linda?
need motions tonight.
Oh.
You just had recommendations this
Boy,
afternoon.
That's right. I just blitzed right through that. Okay. Back up, Kathy. Okay, so the first resolution we had this afternoon.
First motion.
Sorry, the first motion.
That was adopting the 2036 population and employment
Okay, I'm going to have to
recommendations.
stick with this.
I so
I just stay with one
I'll second.
tool at a time. Okay.
I moved, Jack seconded.
Okay, so Terry, you moved the first resolution, which is a multi-jurisdictional resolution regarding the 2036 population and employment allocations, and Jack seconded.
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Michael?
I'll just reiterate that when we first requested these numbers, we asked for some kind of an offsetting agreement from the county. I don't think we've received that yet, but I'm hopeful we might receive that in the year going forward.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion passes 6-1 with Lilliquist in opposition. Okay, then we had a second resolution, a motion, sorry. I haven't had coffee today. We had a second motion asking the administration to bring us a resolution that calls on the county to work with us in the small cities to demonstrate mechanisms for reducing rural growth. That sound right?
Yeah, move the approval of that resolution.
Second.
Or it's not a resolution, it's just a request.
The request of the administration to bring us a resolution. You want to add anything, Kelly?
Oh, I misunderstood this afternoon. I thought it was about impact fees.
That too.
Yes.
That's just part of it.
That's
Included
part of
in,
it?
yeah,
Okay.
impact fees in particular as those mechanisms.
Impact fees.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0.
I'm sorry. May I have the first and the second on that motion?
Jack moved and Roxanne seconded. No problem. Okay, moving on. Then we had a presentation for information only from city staff about their experiences in the Lean Academy and implementing Lean principles into planning and permitting. And I think that's all I'm going to say on that unless anyone else wants to add anything. Okay. It was an awesome presentation, actually, and very impressive list of recommendations that were brought up by staff as to ways that they could be more lean and make some efficiencies in the permitting department. Okay, and wow, bear with me as I learn to use this new tool, please. Then lastly, we had a presentation by Sustainable Connections talking about the Think Local First and Eat Local First programs and the ways that they've been working in our community with those programs. Anything anyone wants to add on those? These were for information only, these two presentations. Okay, and that was Committee of the Whole.
Did we pass the minutes, the night? Not the night.
We did not pass the evening minutes, so now we're going to. We have one set of minutes from Monday, March 24th to pass.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or changes? Nope. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Minutes pass 7-0. Okay, we then went, old or new business. Is there any old or new business to be brought up this evening? Seeing none. Okay, we're going to report out from executive session. We had a number of items, and I had to leave for an appointment, so I was not there, but I'm going to read the report from this afternoon. And it's a little lengthy, so bear with me. Executive session report for Monday, April 7th. Potential litigation. So the first item was potential litigation. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter. Direction was given. No action was taken. The second item was litigation. Association of Bellingham Merchants and Citizens versus the City of Bellingham, Catholic Housing Services, and Catholic Community Services, Whatcom County Superior Court, number 14-2-00268-4. Staff provided an update on this lawsuit challenging Catholic Housing Services' proposal to construct 42 apartment units for low-income tenants and 4,200 square feet of office space at 1122 Cornwall Avenue. Action. I'll entertain a motion authorizing the mayor to execute a settlement agreement with the following terms. 1, the association will dismiss its lawsuit and allow Catholic Housing Services to proceed with its project. And 2, Catholic Community Services agrees to sell the portion of the property not needed for the project to a member of the association at fair market value.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We had a third item, but, well, actually, I can say executive session items 3 through 9 involved potential property acquisitions. For each of these 6 potential property acquisitions, staff provided information on the potential property acquisition. Action was taken. And that is the end of the executive session report. Next up is mayor's report.
The first action is the appointment of Andrea Antrim to the Bellingham Sister Cities Advisory Board. She's a young woman, very enthusiastic and wants to get into the educational aspects. I think she's going to do a great job, and I would ask you to welcome her when you see her, because you don't have to approve her. Secondly, there was a little concern about the agenda being a little light, and I think it's a function of timing rather than not having something that needs to be done. And I put together a list of work sessions or committee meetings, because we've had not committee meetings, though we've had council meetings, and there's several issues that are coming forward for you. One is the B&O tax for the hospital, PEG recommendations, the downtown plan, and parking. And those could all be done through committees. Not the B&O tax, I think that's, Michael, is that at your committee or that at the committee of the whole?
It's probably still in committee.
Okay. Well, we'll figure out where they should go. But at this point in time, we're working on the work plan, and so it really is a good time to have discussions with the council about how we're implementing the work plan that the budget's funded. So that would be really good. And then I have 2 other requests, and I'm happy to work with Kathy on this. One of them is making sure, because when we talked about the population numbers, making sure that the council is very clear with us as we proceed with work on the comp plan, what the council's goals are. And I think that would be very helpful to staff to make sure that they understand what the council's trying to achieve with the comp plan. And we'll try to put together potentially an outline or something we could look at, then maybe we could have a work session on that to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all trying to achieve the same thing. The second thing is, I talked briefly with Michael about this and with Kathy when we met, and it had to do with working with the council on their goals for the budget now instead of in December. There can always be amendments to the budget in December, but I think it would be very helpful for the administration to be able to know what things you'd like to see achieved in the next 2 years, what you'd like to have part of our work plan, what projects or policies that you'd like to see the administration work on. And the reason is because then we can try to build that in up front rather than waiting till the end when pretty much the budget's set. And I think you've all seen from what Brian Henshaw has presented, our revenues are going up at 2.1% and our expenditures are 2.7. Our expenditures are going up at 4.1. So we're still not rolling in dough right now. And I think that I hope we're going to see our revenues keep up. But we're still in a very stable, I believe, stable pattern. We aren't going to have to reduce our budget, I don't believe. But we also don't have a whole lot of money to add to it. And so we need to prioritize. And I'd like to know what your priorities are. That would be part of the 14-15 budget up front. This is the way the county does it for their biennial budget. They're not going to have this meeting, I think, until June or July. I would prefer having ours potentially the end of May if that would work out, because the staffs are going through their work plans right now and the requests that they had both for reappropes and for different services that they'd like to see part of the budget based on their work plans for now. So both of those things I see as half-day work sessions with the council. We could do them, you could do them at night, you could do them at afternoon, you could do them in the morning. It doesn't matter, how you schedule them.
Before the end of May, ideally?
I think before the end of May, if that's possible, because by the time it's the end of May, then we're going into summer, and the department heads are going to have deadlines by when they need to get their recommendations to me.
Okay. We can work on scheduling those.
I don't know if I have anything else to say. I could look and see. Oh, one of the things that struck me as I'm listening to the things that we'd like the county to do is the fact that I believe that you all have good relationships with the county council members and that they represent us. They all represent us too. And peer-to-peer discussions are very productive. Instead of maybe me talking to Jack and, okay, Jack and I can agree. The council is the same as you. They have to approve whatever happens. And I think it would be helpful to get the things done we'd like to get done if they understand from you why this is important or why you believe, you'd like to see them do this or anything like that. So I'm just going to encourage all of you, because I have an opportunity to talk to Jack every Thursday morning and relay to him information. But I just think that more is better, and I'd encourage you to do that too, so people don't get frustrated by potentially what the county's not doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
I think that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Consent agenda.
Gene?
I was trying to suck somebody else into it, but it didn't happen.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Consent
Who is
agenda.
the second? You guys are
Roxanne.
going to have to speak up. Turn on your mic and speak up.
Oh.
Well, I'm not hearing.
The
these
problem
motions.
is, because I do a lot, but Dale has told us not to eat these, so we pushed them away. But I understand. I think we do need to have them closer rather than back away.
I can also do better at reiterating who's doing what. So we have a motion by Jean and a second from Roxanne for the consent agenda. And did we pass it? Did I just say all in favor? Please signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda. Final consideration of ordinances.
Okay, I'm going to try something new here. I'm going to read it and try to do the vote on the new system, so we'll see if that works.
Good, we can both be experimenting together.
Okay, Agenda Bill 20353, an ordinance relating to the 2014 budget reconciling the differences between budgeted, estimated 2014 beginning reserve balances and actual 2014 beginning reserve balances, and placing the differences in the ending reserve balances for a net reserve increase of $42,697,986.
Move third and final.
Second. Now, both of you don't do it at the same time.
Is Jean and Jack?
Yeah. Terry.
I didn't
Terry.
say anything. I made the motion.
Terry.
Oh, it's Terry and
Jean?
Yes.
Okay.
Little quick.
Better attention. Sorry, I was reading. I'm with you.
Okay. Kathy Lehman?
Aye.
Jean Knudsen?
Aye.
Michael Lillquist?
Aye.
Jack Weiss?
Aye.
Pinky Vargas?
Aye.
Terry Borneman?
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy?
Aye.
Sorry,
It's fine.
trying to make this work. Okay. Ordinance passes 7-0. Sorry.
Yeah,
An
don't be
ordinance
sorry.
relating to the 2014 budget An ordinance relating to the 2014 budget appropriating $14,833,288.86 in additional funds to pay for goods and services ordered in 2013 but unpaid at year-end closing from revenue and estimated ending reserve balances.
Move third and final.
Second.
Boy, we're
I
pathetic.
heard Michael.
Terry and Roxanne.
You, Roxanne. Okay. Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
Jack Weiss,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Jean Knudsen,
Yes.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20355, an ordinance relating to the 2014 budget appropriating $46,147,495.87 in additional resources to pay for goods and services that were authorized in 2013 but were not obligated by purchase order or contract by year end from estimated reserves and revenue and placing $794,446.52 in estimated ending restricted reserves.
Move third and final.
Second. Terry and Roxanne had that one.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Jean Knudsen.
Aye.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20348, an ordinance amending Bellingham Municipal Code, BMC, Section 4.82.060 regarding ambulance service rates.
Move third and final.
Second.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Jean Knudsen.
Aye.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0.
And with that, we are adjourned.